So we saw in a previous video this code printing out the letter grade of a student given their student name and their student score in the class. We also saw that we were only able to input one student name and one student grade, and then our program would just end and we would have to rerun our program if we wanted to do it with a separate student. So if we want our program to continue doing the same code that says get a student name, get a grade, and print out their letter grade, then we need a loop so that it keeps printing out what their letter grade is, asking for another student, asking for another grade, and then printing out the next student's name and their grade. So what we can do here is we can add a while loop around all of our code that we want to repeat. So we want to repeat getting the student name, we want to repeat getting their score, and we want to repeat actually printing out what they got in the class. So I'll have a closing curly brace here and an opening curly brace here. And I'm just going to go ahead and tab this in just so that it's a little nicer. There we go. So what we'll see here is that we need a condition. So for now, I'm just going to write true. And what you're seeing here is an infinite loop. This is called an infinite loop because it's going to go on and on forever because this condition will always be true. I said that a while loop will finish and stop repeating the code whenever this becomes false. But if we just type in true here, it's always going to be true. So while true, we do this code, we jump back up, it's still true, so we do this code again and again and again. So at this point, our program will just never finish. And we don't really want that generally because we want our programs to finish eventually. So for now, I'm just gonna leave this while true, and in the next couple videos, I'm gonna show how we can add some conditions here that'll eventually become false so that we don't continue running this code over and over again until your computer turns off. So currently, I have this other program running, so let me start it again now that I have the new code, and let's see what happens. What you'll see now is I'm actually going to get a runtime error. So first I'm going to put the first name, a 90, and then I'm going to try putting in the next student, and you'll see I'm going to get a runtime error. Now we've discussed compiler errors, and compiler errors is when the compiling step fails. So when we're trying to compile this down into code that the computer can understand, and we're trying to translate it, some part of that doesn't work because there's some syntax errors are here, or we messed up some wording, or we spelled something wrong, or we're using a variable that doesn't exist, and we're unable to compile. But this is a runtime error. This is the first time we've seen a runtime error in this class. And a runtime error is an error that happens when the code is actually running. So that means you made it past the compiling step, it translated, and now you're actually executing instructions in the code, but something went wrong while it was running. So if you see the exception here, it says input mismatch exception. And this error is kind of hard to dissect what the issue is, but I'm going to tell you what it is and explain how we can fix it. So at the very beginning, we say Christina, that gets put into student name. Then we say 90, and that gets put into student score. What you don't know is that hidden here is a new line character. So when we actually click that return or that enter button, we are putting a new line character. Now, scan.nextLine will take in the next line, and that includes the new line character. So Christina will have Christina with the new line put inside student name. So scan.nextLine will take in Christina, and it'll disregard that new line character at the end. When we say student score is 90, and then we click enter, it's gonna put that 90 into student score, but there's still a dangling new line character that the scanner didn't account for. So the scanner's pretending like it never read that new line character. So once we finish this first loop and we print out that Christina got an A in the class, we get to the bottom, we get to the while loop, it's true, so we go back into the code. Scan.nextLine, instead of getting Bianca, is going to get this new line that we never read. Scan.nextLine is going to get whatever the next line is, and since we didn't account for the new line in the previous loop, it's going to get new line. So student name is actually just going to have a new line character now instead of having the name Bianca. Then we're going to go to this next line of code, student score, and it's going to try putting Bianca in there. The problem with putting Bianca in there is that student score is of type double, and Bianca is not a double. Bianca is actually a string. So that's why we're getting an input mismatch exception. The types are not matching here. So an easy way to fix this is by just putting scan dot next line down here. So what this is going to do is, once it gets Christina and student name and it gets 90 in here, we're just going to tell the scanner, read the next line. And the next line is going to be that new line symbol. So it's going to get rid of it. It's going to read it and get rid of it. And then when it loops again, student name is going to finally just be Bianca, because it's going to have read this new line character that's hidden here, and it's going to get to Bianca. So let's try running this and see if we get better results. So we'll type in Christina, we'll put a 90. Now let's try typing in Bianca, we'll put an 80, and there we go. And now we can continue putting people's names in here. We'll put a 50, they got an F. And you'll see that this just runs forever. This is an infinite loop, so we can continue writing names in here. I'm running out of names that I can think of. 50. So we could continue writing names in here forever, and this program will just continue running. In the next couple videos, I'm going to show you how to write while loops that only happen a certain number of times, or while loops that eventually the condition will evaluate to false, so you'll see that eventually it'll finally stop. So since this is an infinite loop, if I were to put some code down here, we know we would never get to this code, just because this while loop is going to happen so many times forever. It's never going to end, that we'll never get to this line of code down here. So if you have a infinite loop that never evaluates to false, you'll see that you'll never be able to run the code below it. So we don't want these while true loops happening, because they just never end.